And I know that you actually built your own setup. Can you talk to us about the DIY hydroponic recirculating system that you set up?
Well, for my setups, for the most part, I like to have a basis and, before I build, so I can have some expectations at the end. A lot of it does pertain to budget and the space I have to work with, and more or less trying to maximize the usages of what I have already and what I need to get. With my 2x4 design, I designed like I mentioned, a 3-plan RDWC system. I also kind of implicated a waterfall to get like top roots cut with top roots some moisture as well. Those are kind of like the idea of a bubble ponics kind of system where you have a waterfall and then you give some nutrients to the top roots so they can expand through the oxygen gap between the bubbles coming from the bottom of the water. So you essentially don't want to fill up your water too high. I have a 4-gallon bucket. I merely fill it up like a third, and then it kind of all the moisture hits the roots anyways, and there's very little dry back. The basics to some deep water cultures require a reservoir depending on how you go about adding your nutrients. I personally deleted my reservoir and even my chiller for more space within my room. But depending on your situation, I know it's kind of humid where you stay. Water temperatures might be kind of up there. So I can imagine using a chiller would be more optimal for you guys. Unfortunately, I didn't need that, so I kind of pulled it, saved some electricity and the extra, computer tower that had to sit on the outside of my tents. But here in Cali, I'm pretty good with my water temps at mid-60s sometimes. I mean, the colder the better, not too cold, but colder roots, the better the uptake for the most part. Like I was mentioning earlier about space management, so I do a lot of measurements. I make sure everything does fit, especially with the buckets. They're not easy to find for, let's say, aside from commercial use, you have to go far and wide trying to find these buckets with the proper lids if they don't already come with them. I use Uline. They do sell a lot of commercial materials for job sites and this and that, but anybody can purchase it regardless of your status of wholesaler or being in business. To be honest, I found my buckets at Home Depot. They were sitting on a stack. I guess they were putting flowers in them, and they were there to take. So I'm like, oh, can I have these? I'm going to use them for a project. I'm like, yeah, take a few if you want. They're essentially trash, but there's some nice black buckets that I found lids on Uline for, and I drilled out some holes, added a netting pot on there to hold my rock wool, essentially the plant that's going to be growing in there for the rest of its life. And by the way, my netting pots are anywhere from 8 inches, pretty big ones that sit halfway through the bucket, and great expansion for my roots, and the rock wool opens up pretty well. I fill the gaps with hydrant, and it does pretty well with the drainage for that same reason. And as for the flow, I've gone from vinyl tubing to PVC piping. I found different outlets on Uline and even Amazon for that same reason to kind of build it properly, make sure everything fits. And for the same reason, you don't want to build something like this and not be sure that's not going to fail. The worst thing in the world is a water leak midway through your grow, and you have to flush and then redo it all over again, dismantle it and find your leak, seal it, and go forth. That's kind of the nightmare of hydroponics or deep water culture. It's like filling the bottom of your tent with water, getting that vacuum out.
You mentioned 4-gallon buckets. Why 4-gallon? Would it be better with a larger bucket, smaller? Why 4?
It really depends on, again, the spacing that you have. The taller the bucket, I probably wouldn't mind too much, but the 4-gallon bucket height is anywhere from a foot and a quarter up, and then they're maybe 10 inches wide. So it's a great fit for giving the space for the plant to grow upwards, and it doesn't take too much space around it. So I can have piping and other things like different fans and maybe a pump for my water within the tent, more as a cleaner area.
And are you ever concerned of the roots kind of filling up that space? How do you know, plant size to bucket size?
that's kind of like a blessing, and then you know, in a situation all in itself, because like the more roots, definitely you want to get. Everyone wants roots. You want to fill your, even in soil, you want to fill your bucket, your pot over roots as much as you can. At the same time, I have my water flowing through one another, and these roots can get clogged within those pipes. And at the same time, that's why people have bigger pipes, so the roots don't kind of like clog up and affect the next pot over. But yeah, that's a battle in itself. So like you want the bigger roots, but at the same time you don't want clogs either, because you need that water to flow and not overflow at the same time. My my drip, it's taken out of the one of the same buckets that's connected. So it's taking water from the bottom and throwing it on top of each of the other bottom buckets. So it's just going to overflow if I have one in the clogged at the same time. So maintaining them is definitely a good idea. Keeping an eye on them.
Got it. That makes sense. And then what size tubing or PVC? And how do you kind of determine that? I know you said you're using a 4-gal, like what size tubing for the 4-gal? And then is it go by number of plants to the size tubing? Does that relate at all or no?
With this, my most recent build, it was availability. And I would have definitely went bigger tubing. I personally have it at 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches. So I would definitely have gone to 2 or 3, but the second part that's needed wasn't always available. So the knuckle that I thread the PVC into, I didn't have the other part to go bigger than what I had. So I'm dealt those cards, so I kind of make the best of it, if anything. But I hope they have a 3-inch like threaded knuckle that I can add to my next setup. I definitely would go bigger for that same reason with the roots and the clogging issues. ABS maybe it's black versus white. It'll take in less lighting and no buildup of like algae between the tubes. It's thick enough, I believe. So I personally haven't come across it with this tube, but you will with vinyl all day.
Okay, good to know. And then reservoir. If I know you said you're not running a reservoir, but for those that are looking to run a reservoir, how do they determine what size to use?
Reservoir space. Personally, when I did have my reservoir, it was great to have it to the left of whichever side of my tent. With that reservoir out there, you're going to have to find a means to run a line. And you can't run lines horizontally or at an angle or anything like this. For that same reason, you need to have it level to the ground so the water can flow. And a lot of these tents aren't made with outlets at the bottom of the tent. They're usually like have a foot up for ducts or cables. So you're gonna have to punch some holes to the bottom of your tent and kind of modify an outlet so you can find a side for your reservoir. And as for the size of it, it really depends on how much you want to suspend for your tanks to use. So it's a reservoir and then an automatic fill. So when your reservoir starts losing water, it starts refilling from the top bucket. And those go anywhere from 10, 15 gallons. They're convenient as hell, really. You don't have to go inside your tent. Your refills are much easier. I want to say maybe your flushing would probably be more of a pain and kind of clearing out, an extra bucket, especially if your grow is more compact. But I always look for more efficiency for my turn and how much more easier it would be. And even if it's the same idea or outcome, I'm probably going to go for the latter end.
And then can you talk to us about pump size? Like if somebody's building their own system and whether it be a 4-plant system or 8-plant system, how do they determine what pump size and how many air stones to kind of put in each bucket?
To be honest, I've always found myself always going bigger the better for some things, or the better quality and brand for that same reason. But there's definitely a minimum of let's say for your air pump. I have a 3-plant system with 6-inch flat air stones, and I have one commercial pump with outlets running for all of them. There's definitely smaller versions of them, less loud or more loud for that. It really depends on your situation. General Hydroponics, they make some simple pumps with pre-lead outlets. Amazon has several pumps that are really affordable, and they come with outlets too, and not. To be honest, they're not as bad. they're just a name, really. They're all pretty remade in the same place. But I personally use a commercial one. It's yay big and it's very quiet. It has some rubber like feet, so it kind of vibrations go off the floor. It runs 24 hours. I've been running it for several years now. Didn't spend too much on it. Again, it's one of those things I was able to purchase like. I think someone had it used, Fallout on someone on Instagram, or not Instagram, on OfferUp. Growers fall out all the time and they kind of give up on the hobby. And I come up on some of these products. Here in California, we have shops that close down on the regular and turn around and have to sell their materials and like parts, and that's me picking it up on the other end if I could find it.
This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrow at 15 to save on any of their products.